Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the eDiscovery channel after a long Martin Luther King weekend here in the United States. Tom O'Connor here from very pleasant, for once, New Orleans, Louisiana. Counting down the days to Mardi Gras, which is like, I forget, it's like 4 weeks from today or 5 weeks from today. I don't know. But it's a Tuesday.
We're getting there.
Yeah,
it's
getting
Tuesday.
close.
No way. It starts on a Tuesday. That's so shocking.
Mardi Gras, Fat Tuesday, baby.
Yeah,
That's it. Well, it doesn't start then. Mardi Gras actually starts on the Feast of the Epiphany.
Right.
But I won't get into the whole Catholic education thing,
Right.
which is set by the first day of Easter, which is set by the vernal equinox,
Yep.
set by the positronic thrusters being fired up underground at the Vatican. So this year it will be, I don't even know, February 21st, I think.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're coming up. I think we'll get some, maybe not this weekend. I don't think we'll have, I think the first parades are going to be the 28th of January. They try to condense them now for police department purposes, try to get enough guys to cover all the parades. Any event, that's my Mardi Gras update. Yeah. We'll have plenty of time for tomfoolery recordings between now and then, believe me.
Well, right. And then, I mean, because after that, the second biggest holiday in New Orleans is coming up after that.
That's correct. Jazz Fest, which is always the last weekend of April and the first weekend in May.
And they announced the lineup.
They just announced the lineup the other day, which looks very good. They've already sold out. WWFZ has sold out close to 70% of all their brass passes. The full pass that they sell as a fundraiser for all 7 days, in and out privileges. You, however, need no tickets to come and hang out at my house and eat crawfish, which is right across from the Savage Street gate entrance into the Jazz Fest. Now we will be there with bells on.
Awesome.
Be there with crawfish in the pot.
Yeah, that's all that really matters.
That's all that matters. And obviously my partner in mischief here, Rachi Messing, which I just affirmed he is still in Tel Aviv for another week. Rachi, you said?
Yeah, another week until I head stateside for a little bit.
Well, you said you're going to Hawaii. We don't really consider that stateside.
Well, I'm first going to be in the Continental, and then I'm going to Hawaii. It would be a long flight from Tel Aviv directly to Hawaii.
We got Disney World, we got Las Vegas, then we got Hawaii.
Yeah,
exactly. And we are very pleased today to have with us. I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, unless you've been living under a rock someplace for the last 6 or 7 years, recognize Kat Casey, who is the Chief Growth Officer at Reveal Brainspace. Kat, we were hoping you'd have some things where like balloons would be coming out with text.
Right, sparkles, come on.
Yeah, instead of talking, I'd expect to see some,
You can't see it, but there is a neon Technocat sign behind me, but I
really?
figured, oh yeah. Never
okay.
Never
Nice. Well, thanks for joining us.
I was thinking of sending you a glitter bomb just before.
That's
this.
right.
Oh, good Lord. That would make my inner tidiness freak out. I'd have to find all the little bits of sparkly chaos, which I guess is probably a good analogy for yours truly, sparkly chaos.
There you go.
That works. It works.
Well, tell us, Kat, we always try to keep this casual, but get a little bit of background information, and tell us a little bit about where you're from and education and all that, and more importantly, how'd you get into this crazy business?
No, totally. So I decided, like most people do at 12, that I was either going to be a lawyer or a doctor, because
there you go.
If I ever made a mistake as a doctor, it was much harder to fix than as a lawyer, and I could appeal. That would be
solid reasoning. Solid reasoning.
Yeah. So then I went to undergrad. I finished Harvard in 3 years, went right into law school, got in a little bit, and was like, I don't know if I want to practice.
Now, excuse me. So let me interrupt there. Because I lived in Cambridge off and on throughout many of the days of my youth. Were you living in Boston? You from Boston? Where are you from?
So I was born in Mass General in Boston, Mass.
All right.
I ping pong though. I grew up, I was 1 year in Boston and then 13 years in California. And then I ended up in Texas and then back in Boston. So it's kind of but all my family.
Excellent. I actually
Cool.
lived in Cambridge, just down Mass Ave, right down by the Plow and Stars, the Irish pub. It's about halfway between Harvard Square and Central Square. Lived there for about a year. Yeah.
Awesome.
Although I didn't love it enough not to go to Pepperdine for law school in Malibu because I thought
Wow.
winter surfing.
Not to mention the view.
That's a hard one. Yeah.
And full ride. So I was like, I got to do it. But then I realized I didn't want to practice. And so my journey.
So hold on. So time out. So you decided that you didn't want to practice already while you were in law school, or okay.
Yeah. I was just I was great grades. I was really good at the technical side of it. And I looked forward and I thought my future at the time, because I didn't know about eDiscovery and emerging technology and all that. I was like, I'm going to be locked drafting briefs and not in the courtroom. This is going to be soul crushing. And so, and so I took a pause and I was like, maybe what I'm going to be good at is like what my dad did. My dad was like a complex defense contract sales guy. I'm like, I've never sold anything. Can I do this? Don't know. But I'm a scientist at heart. Let me do a little experiment. What's kind of the grossest type of sales I can think of? Cars. Definitely cars. But what am I going to make a lot of money doing? BMWs in Orange County. And within 3 months of doing that, I was the top grossing salesperson in North America and got hired to do eDiscovery by someone I sold an overpriced BMW to.
There you go. That's a nice segue.
That's how you ended up in eDiscovery?
It is, yeah. And I started on like the staffing side. So it was like the executive recruiting, the big contract attorney teams. And I was like, all right, I can do this, but I'm not as interested in this as like the emerging tech. I had started writing about like AI models and game theory when I worked at Agilon. So like I was just interested in analytics and AI. And so I went from doing the big, I don't know, Intel, AMD lawsuit cases where I was providing 500 attorneys to, I want to get on the tech side. And so I kind of made the rounds at a couple different, more like LSPs, right? So they weren't making their own software. But after a while of doing that, I was like, I want to kind of be in the trenches doing more consulting. So I went to the big four. I did PwC and KPMG, where I was helping collect the Theranos laptops, right? I was doing all this interesting in the trenches stuff. And then I made a friend on LinkedIn who invited me to lunch and said, Kat, I'm leaving Gibson Dunn. You should run the program. And so I went from the consulting side to running the global eDiscovery practice at Gibson Dunn as my first ever law firm job. Did that for several years. And then I had to move back to Texas, got recruited by a software company, another SaaS company, did that for a few years. And now I am the chief growth officer, all things hype, all things FOMO, innovation, M&A, you name it. I'm the cat of all trades with Reveal, cat which of all
trades.
Well,
nice.
Yeah.
And so
okay, so let's back up. Let's dissect some of this. So you went from selling cars and having your law degree.
Not just cars, BMWs. Come on.
BMW, sorry, not just cars, right?
Yeah.
And down in Del Mar selling used cars.
I was in Newport Beach. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's slightly different.
I realized if I could do get people to pay $35,000 over sticker on a $150,000 car, it's transactional, but these are big enough dollar amounts that, I can probably do something more complicated. And the guy I sold to was like, hey, you have a legal background. And I come from a tech family. My grandfather created virtual memory. So laptops and computers and AI was always very much in the dialogue in my family. And so I'm like, wait, this is kind of a perfect crossover. It's, I can influence people. And at the time I was doing direct sales. Now I do much more just influencing people, educating, I'm making them less afraid of AI, kind of like the rising tide raises all the ships. But early on, I was like, this is a great, for 23 at the time. So I graduated undergrad at 20, it was law school at 23. This is a great way to kind of synthesize all the stuff I want to do without being in the box of I'm in a cube writing briefs or doing doc review for the first 5 years. And it let me really kind of meet and interact with people. Like I was talking with Andy Peck about Da Silva Moore at 24. I wouldn't have had that exposure, Judge Peck, sorry.
I was going to say, did you call him Andy? No.
I do.
Now you do. Yeah, I'm saying that.
Yeah, right. I did then too.
Okay.
He adopted me. I think I was like his project. He was like, oh, this AI thing.
I'll have a pet cat. Right.
Yeah.
So hold on. So did you take the bar?
No, and I kind of gone back and forth on it, but at this point, and really frankly, 4 or 5 years into my career, it would have been such an opportunity cost. And what I looked at was what I'm really good at is not really influencing people. I'm a translator. So sitting in this intersection of legal language and or legal technology language, eDiscovery, software language, and being able to, because I did debate growing up and all that sort of stuff. Being able to use that linguistic capability and explaining stuff that's very complicated and daunting really was my superpower. And so I kind of look back and like, would I have a better role? Would I have a better anything if I kind of pursue that? Do I even want to use my degree?
Right.
So I look at law school as it taught me how to, if technology is, Chinese and legal is Latin, it taught me the language so I could kind of translate it for folks.
Then do the translation, right? Yeah. So when you went from, selling not just any cars, BMWs, but to go to
not just any BMWs, the BMWs at the top grossing dealership in North America.
Oh, sorry. I in no way meant to.
I want to stack the deck, is what I'm letting you know.
Exactly. But you went to go work for a staffing company or
yeah. What was the first one? Would have been maybe Agilon was the first. Was it Agilon? No. Before Kelly. I feel like Agilon was the first one. So I was doing like executive recruiting of lawyers and then in Texas. And so I kind of fell into, they're like, hey, what about these teams of attorneys? Do you know anything about getting 30 or 50 attorneys? And they had no clue. And so I kind of learned about it there. And I actually moved to DC over with Kelly Law Registry because I realized there's a whole industry around this eDiscovery and doc review stuff, but you've got to be in New York or DC. And I couldn't stand New York yet.
So that's what I was going to ask. From a eDiscovery perspective, you only actually got introduced a little bit later, right? Because when you started off on just straight up attorneys, executive recruiting, but then when you switched to teams,
honestly, like it was so
it was pretty
there
good.
there were some, I don't remember what the lawsuit was, but there was a case where they needed like 50 attorneys in Austin. It may have actually been, I remember there were like warehouses with asbestos floating down in the air when we were actually looking in the bankers' boxes. I want to say it was like asbestos, maybe not mesothelioma, maybe like it was, or even, it may have even been like the nicotine ones, but it was a long
tobacco litigation. Yeah,
tobacco
around that time. We had the databases, and I worked on that case. We had the database in Fort Worth, but Walter Humphrey was the lead outside counsel for that, so we were back and forth through Austin all the time.
Yeah. And so it's just one of those where I looked at the stack ranking of the folks. Once I knew what this kind of temporary attorney thing was, I'm like, wow, these people are doing so much more. There's so many bigger cases. All the big firms are there. And, I kind of put some feelers out. I got some bites in DC, some bites in New York, and I ended up taking the leap. Actually, Trish Alatorre Riding in DC kind of took me under her wing and was wonderful, and kind of got me involved in Women in eDiscovery and doing all the DC network. And I was in DC probably for 9 years, a decade. I did both the kind of the Kelly Law and Hudson, but also then I sort of made the segue to the tech side. So I think it was Applied Discovery might have been the first one I did. So one of the PDF based ones. And what I loved was it let me learn the language of how does this technology work? What is this workflow? What is this process? Because I was coming in, they didn't have an eDiscovery class in law school. They barely covered Civ Pro, right? I mean, they had a course for Civ Pro, but it was much more like the motion practice than it was the practical mechanics of it.
Actually what happens, right?
So, I started learning about it at Hudson, then over to Applied, and it was, a good proving ground. And then I think I probably grew the most doing all the variety of crazy massive cases when I was the Big Four. And then running a program, I always joke, I'm like, leave it to me. I want to come in at top. I didn't have any law firm jobs, but then I ran the damn program.
So, so you've got Big Four, you've got law firm, you've got, LSPs and software companies. You've been in all of that. And we'll get into some more specifics, but overall, what did you enjoy about them, each one? Like what was something that you learned from each one versus something that you hated at each one?
So
And I don't mean specific companies. I'm talking
no,
in
100%.
general, the LSPs and versus the consulting versus
Yeah.
software.
So the LSPs were in two flavors. So where it was more review heavy, like where it was more about bodies, you were so late in the process that you weren't able to like be involved in strategy and efficiency and workflow. And so that bothered me, but I did like kind of seeing like the end of the EDRM, what's happening once the data is processed. So it was actually, I did a little backwards. I started at the end and worked my way left, but it was really interesting to see that. Then on the software side, I loved kind of being at that intersection of the case teams being a little more in strategy, but not necessarily being responsible for the efficacy of the software because, there was who you were going to use.
Right.
I feel like I got the most strategic at the Big Four because I was able to kind of be much more consultative with the core. Like, I feel like the Big Four, I was almost part of the case team in a different way. So it'd be the law firm, outside counsel, and then even though the Big Four is a vendor, it was still thought of as a consultancy. So it was a little more strategic. I would say the law firm, I loved educating people. I loved my team. It was challenging being in the staff side of the house versus in the lawyer side because my practice was $75 million, but it was still like, well, you get the staff benefits package and I'll talk to you later.
Yeah.
And so I think that's changing. That would have been 2016-ish. And then on the software side, I like fixing the problems. Like a lot of what I do is because not many people have all sides of the spectrum for their personal experience. I can kind of bring to bear all of that in talking with my dev team or looking at who we want to acquire. And I feel like I have the most freedom to be technocat, to kind of have this whole persona I've built and educate and inspire people and help bridge the knowledge gap around AI much more so than I could at the Big Four or the law firm. I can't speak to the LSP side because I was just so much more junior then. Like I didn't have this whole
You're still learning
identity. Right. I feel like I've been working on it on social media for probably 15 years. I think that was when I got onto LinkedIn, but I didn't really get good at it till probably after the law firm days. And because the law firm was like, don't say anything, please.
Right. Stay quiet. So, okay, we are going to dig into that. I've got some very specific TikTok questions, but but was the law firm your first time managing a team, or were you managing also in some of the positions beforehand?
It was the first time I was managing the team doing the eDiscovery. Like I'd had salespeople under me. I'd had entire 500 or whatever attorneys under me, but I hadn't really been like, all right, I didn't have a project management team under me and I didn't have to deal with the load balancing of cases. Like it was more, the LSPs were very big. And so it was much more a machine of 100 parts that was working on cases as opposed to 25. Right. Or I was, I was a hub in a big, a big spoked wheel. And this time it was a lot more visibility, a lot more kind of being in and consulting on, all right, we've got a massive 50 terabyte migration from a legacy tool that I don't even think exists anymore into a current one. What sort of infrastructure do we need? Is it cloud? Is it on-prem? What's the data security? How am I going to convert it? Blah, blah, blah. Like being involved in the trenches more was a lot more exciting. I had a degree of that. And I guess let me take a step back. The Big Four, I had a team of 50 people I was one of the 4 or 5 directors they were rolling up to. And so I would have teams probably of 25 or 30 under me on specific cases, but it was a little more matrix, right? Whereas it was more like being the partner of an, eDiscovery program. And
did you enjoy it?
I did. There were a couple things I had ideas about. Like I was like, we need to have AI in house, and so I was, co-head the AI committee and got Brainspace in house. I was we need to have international expansion, so I expanded into our London area, London and London adjacent. There were a couple other ideas I had, like, hey, why don't you?
Wait a minute. As an Irishman, I got to ask, what do you mean by London adjacent?
It was not Dublin. No. It was like a
okay. Thank you very much.
Suburb. We had 2 offices in London and one it took a long time by Uber to get to.
Right.
And then so it was just it was fascinating. I think where I bristled was I felt like there was so much more we could do. Like, hey, if we just said, hey, global firm, instead of opting into using my program, which was about 20 million out of 75, why don't you just make people opt out and explain why they don't want to work with us? Because that could help move our global profits per partner from 11th to 10th globally. You'd think the dollars and cents would have resonated. They did not.
Yeah, but big law firms are too feudal from office stuff, which actually begs a question I was thinking of when you were talking about themes. It's the anti-team question. Who are the bigger cutthroat, do it my way, I'm not working with anybody gunslingers? Car salesmen or litigators?
Yes.
A good answer.
That's what I thought.
Although I may be a little skewed because I was 23 selling cars and they were being nice to me still. If I was actually confident and knew my stuff and was competing even more with them and had stayed longer, they might have been more cutthroat.
Yep.
But I mean, it was the same thing though, like just mitigate fear, educate people, know your whatever.
Know your product, right? Know your product.
And our product is extracting value, mitigating risk and data, and making it less scary, you know?
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, obviously you've made a, not gonna say, well, a career out of talking about AI, and pushing on the fact that AI, well, the usage of AI, trying to be that translator to make it not scary. Why do you think people are still scared? They hear AI, right? And yeah, they hear, okay, there's this chat GPT thing and whatever, but people still, when it comes to litigation, they, as much as we've been talking about AI for the last 10 years in litigation in terms of practical use, right? And we've been talking about it for probably 5 to 10 years before that, of it's coming and there are some specific examples, but not actually true practical use. Why are people still scared of it? Why is there this fear in regards to AI?
And by people, you mean lawyers?
Well, the people who would use it but aren't using it, yeah.
Well, but I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kat, I don't think lit support people, and certainly not IT people, are scared the way that lawyers.
I agree with Kat on that one. It's not a.
I think
there's still plenty of people who are scared.
I think lit support is scared because there's so much divisiveness with the lawyers. And so there's a fear of putting yourself out there.
Fair enough.
Is hybrid.
That's fair. Yep.
And the why is simple. There probably were a lot of other 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds that were sitting on the playground and decided STEM is one career path, words and phrases, and liberal arts is another. Liberal arts is what they started doubling down on. So if I know,
right, I was promised there won't be math. Right.
But also, if I know what's going to differentiate myself as like philosophy and government and all this stuff to prep me for law school, I'm going to do those at the expense of advanced STEM, right? And lawyers tend to be pretty type A, successful people. They like doing things they're good at. And especially for some of the more veteran ones, they've been really, really good at their niche for a very long time. Going outside that box and trying something new it's like going to the gym for the first time in 6 years. That hurts. It's scary. I don't want to go back. No, don't make me, please. Oh God, stop.
I'm not good at it. Other people understand it. Well, you know what, lawyers, you know, I'm sure you've seen this. You can be talking to a
you're about to say
lawyer.
that they're human.
They're what?
You're about to say that lawyers are human.
No.
Okay. Whew.
I mean, technically, they're not all human because there is one AI that's going to court, right? I think
that's right. No, I think
court or whatever.
I think we've all had the experience that you could be talking to not even a room full of lawyers, a team of lawyers on a case, a group of lawyers. But if you say something that they don't understand, they don't tell you that. They won't say, whoa, hold the phone. What are you talking about? I was working on a matter with a client the other day, and we were an hour and a half into the discussion before one of the lawyers kind of did this and said, excuse me, what's a custodian? You know, they are reluctant to, especially in that peer setting, to show that they don't know as much as the other water buffaloes in the room. And
well, I think a little of it is shame on us because we've been on a 20-year journey and we're much further ahead than people that maybe didn't even start knowing about this till 3 or 4 years ago.
I know. I find that all the time. I have to be conscious of not talking over the audience.
That's why I do a lot of like cheeky, it seems very simple and basic stuff because I'm trying to demystify the stuff folks are afraid to ask. And you don't start, you don't start doing the Tour de France, you start with training wheels, and then you go without the training wheels. And so, part of that is we operate in a bubble. Like, all of us talk to each other, we like each other. We're talking about, oh, what's the ethical?
I don't like most of them.
Web3
Rocky and I tolerate each other. There's 3 of them I like you, and I like George, and I like David Horrigan,
But we're in a
That's it.
bubble, though. Like,
Notice I did not make the list.
No, I already said I like Rocky and I like you. I said that at the beginning. This is getting to be like Manning cast, man. This is hilarious. But I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Ken.
No, but like, I think because we're in this bubble and we're talking about it, we're in a feedback loop, and like, we're assuming folks know things that we had to learn over time.
Yes.
In a process.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
And it's kind of crazy, because when you think about the use of AI in eDiscovery, it's actually kind of simplistic, not even AI when it comes down to it. I mean,
machine learning.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
I think we froze him.
You froze him up. You said machine learning, and Rocky had a recoil.
No, the machine attacked me.
Skynet reacted.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's really kind of crazy, because it is simplistic in what we're trying to do. I mean, yes, there is certainly complexity, and the workflow can be very complex when it comes down to it, and not because necessarily of the machine learning AI, but because the legal discovery workflow can be complex, and now you're just introducing a curveball into it. So again, so we talked a little bit about why they're afraid. But how can we explain, besides just saying it's simple? You can say it's simple as many times as you want, right? You can try to put things out there. But how do we actually get through to them? And what do you see working? Because you've been at this in terms of the education side of it for a long time. And I'm sure that you've had things that have just fallen flat on their face, and things that have actually taken off. So what have you seen that's worked versus what doesn't work?
I think my favorite thing to do, I probably said it, I don't know, 50 or 100 different conferences, is I ask the audience, how many of you here use AI? And 3, 4, 5 years ago, crickets. Now a few people gingerly raise their hand. I'm like, oh, okay, so you don't have an Amazon or GPS, you don't have Facebook people you may know, you don't. And I kind of listed off. And I think part of it's going to be, let me take a step back. This is the second mistake our industry made. We made AI too special and different and foreign. And so it became a different workflow, and it became scary and different. And I think looking at how consumer has made very advanced AI successful, like, you don't know the crazy math behind Google, you just see a little query bar, simple, right? I think the way that it's going to be successful is demystifying AI and pointing out how many ways you're already relying on it. You would never bring an atlas out instead of using GPS. You're not going to do a phone book instead of
nothing to do. Come on, that has nothing to do with figuring out which documents are relevant.
But it's the first step, demystifying AI and making people realize, oh, I've already taken the leap. I already trust it. I'm already comfortable with it. Okay, let me see if I can use it in other ways. And then I think the second thing we do is we bake it in a more seamless way. If Google had a 10 query segment that looked more like coding, no one would use Google. You've got to make it end user, front end accessible, and then back end powerful, right? And so I think that it's that double-edged sword, demystifying it, making it less scary, making the UX iPhone easy, and the back end powerful. Like, you don't look at Google and think, oh, it's just one line, it must be really weak and not very good. You think it brings me good answers. And I think if we can get away from AI workflow, not AI workflow, to just AI baked into the review platform that you can use in the context of a traditional, and I'm not thinking not just Cal, I'm talking about, concept analysis, sentiment analysis,
analytic, just the whole,
all of it, right? If that's
but and not to put you on the spot, Kat, but I'm going to.
How dare you?
Isn't part of the fact that many vendors, I won't say any in particular, but especially when all of this started, needed to make it special to charge more. If you're going to bundle it all in.
by segregating it out into a separate billable item, it automatically means, oh, I'm paying something extra.
I mean,
for
I had
Something special. Yeah,
I had
right.
people battle me on doing email threading because it was rolled up into an analytic package, right? And so I think that, I mean, we're all in. I think a lot of companies are going to all-in pricing.
yeah, I think we're getting there now. Yeah.
You don't want any barriers to people doing the right thing. And the right thing is using all the tech there to quickly figure out the who, what, when, where, why, to figure out answers. So then you can do what you went to law school for, which is fact-driven case development or development of a strategy. And so I
Oh,
think,
yeah, I went to law school.
I mean, or avoided law school like the plague,
But-
either way.
Oh, no, I went to law school.
I was gonna say, do you remember law school, Tom?
Oh, no, no, but we're talking
yeah,
about.
but you know,
Still in
there's a
those
lot of
cozy days.
Oh,
there's a
really?
lot of the 70s I don't remember.
Yeah.
We're talking about the lawyers who are scared. I was not generalizing, like for the lawyers who were scared. So,
Yep.
um,
Okay. So as part of that, the just make it part of your common everyday life. So
Opt out,
Yeah.
not opt in, right? It should be
Exactly.
the default.
Yeah,
And then,
yeah.
and if it's a specific reason, there are use cases where, okay, a more linear approach makes sense, but it should be the default. And then you deviate if there's a good reason to.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. So I assume that that is a big part of why you take the approach that you do on social media, right? It's the social media is part of everyone's everyday life. Now, two questions on that. Number one is where do you find your biggest following? In what platform do you find your biggest
LinkedIn,
following?
all day, every day.
Okay.
Everything else I do is with a lens of it's going to live on LinkedIn. Like I've got, I don't know, 1,000 followers or something on TikTok, but I use it as an editing tool and kind of, I use it as like a sandbox to see, all right, did a couple hundred people like this one? Okay. Because then I've got 25,000 people on LinkedIn. And that's more, I use the TikTok as someone described it really well, like an amuse-bouche, a little snippet. And then I've got like content that's going to then be like a question and then the conversation. And like my goal in all of this is, yeah, I want to be out there, but I want to be talking to the people that are doing this stuff, getting their ideas, and hopefully, you know, myth busting some of the stuff around AI. Like that's kind of the whole mission. And like Twitter, I interact with it. I find it very confusing though.
Okay. And I was gonna say, in terms of the LinkedIn side, between you and I can only think of one other person.
Alex Sue, he's kicking my butt.
Well, actually, I wasn't thinking of Alex. That's a good one, but I was thinking specifically Jerry, who's using a TikTok light approach on LinkedIn. Most people take LinkedIn and they're very serious, you know, like us, you know, we post our interviews and our chats on LinkedIn and we're very serious here. But I can
tell,
you know,
I can tell. That's why I'm turning red from giggling so much.
Yes. But how has that been received, especially amongst the very serious lawyers who are in the room, who you know, they're the ones who you're actually trying to convince. You're not trying to convince the eDiscovery community. So how have they approached it, and what feedback do you get?
They desperately want to laugh too. I mean, if it take you know, Alex Sue as an example, he's getting millions of views. People want something lighthearted, and then you foster conversation. I would say kind of in my very unscientific way, like I look at all the numbers and the metrics and the charts. And when I, you know, post a, you know, straight ahead, hey, have you seen this article? It makes me think XYZ. What do you think? Crickets. If it's something a little divisive, a little cheeky, it goes much further. Like it plays nice with the algorithm, but then the people that interact are having substantive conversations. And so, you know, I think with the law firm, I had to basically stop all social media, and I realized I missed that. And when I was able to go back into it, I was committed to being authentic, and authentic means cheeky, little sparkly chaos, right? And so it's not so much a strategy as it is, hey, I'm interested in this. Hey, this resonates with me. And you know, and I have a big circle of folks who at least sort of like me and talk like me and have, you know, they're equally cheeky too. And, you know, I'm not going to appeal to anyone and everyone. So if I try to aim for the detractors, I won't appeal to the people that have a similar sense of humor, which is a much kind of larger group.
Browning Marian told me that years ago, and it really influenced first just my public speaking,
Mhm.
You know, because, I'm, as you can tell, old enough to predate social media. And some people say I'm hardly social now anyways, but,
You're selective.
Brownie
So-
used to say, don't try to be a professor,
Mhm.
on the podium in the microphone, because he and I started doing these as podcasts.
Mhm.
We were just doing recordings at some of the tech shows, and
Mhm.
he said, yeah, just be yourself, go with that
Mhm.
sort of, whether it's cheeky or reverent or casual, whatever. He said, people are going to react to that. There's enough stuffed shirts in this business now. Not there's anything wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with a good professorial discussion, but Craig Ball's at ball.net, and you can, talk to Craig.
Well,
Yep.
and that's authentically him, though.
And he
Like,
knows I love him.
Right.
I say that with tongue in cheek. Right?
but you know what? If my approach won't work for everyone, and so if Craig suddenly was doing TikToks and being cheeky, he would be so uncomfortable. It would.
Oh,
Yeah.
that would be so awesome.
I mean, I would love
But it would
watching
be
it.
cool. It
I
would be. He would get a
Perhaps-
million hits. He would get a million hits.
Perhaps he's not the best example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Authentic, like all social media, everything, it's social. What does that mean? Connecting and having a conversation. Everything I do is to facilitate that. And if I'm fake, then it's almost like people can tell, right? And
Yeah.
I don't want it to be
Yeah.
picture perfect all the time, because I'm not, And I want people to be able to recognize me if they see me at Legal Week and not be like, oh, no, Facetune, what is that person?
Right.
Exactly. So, I applaud it. I applaud that approach. I wish we had more of it.
So obviously, when you were at the law firm, they shut you down overall.
Yeah,
That's what you said.
they embraced that persona
Right.
wholeheartedly.
They weren't bad about it. They were just, there was additional approval process. And for me, like,
Yeah.
I'll sit down today, and if I'm, got my makeup on, I'll do like 15 TikToks and I'll drip that out over the week. Like, there's a spontaneity to it to
Mhm.
be authentic. And if it had to go through approval process, it just kind of put a damper on the creativity. And I know why. I mean, if you have to do a conflict check just to make sure the TikTok isn't offending someone, like, I get it.
Right.
But that was part of why, like, I was very.
And if it's not offending someone, you're not doing your job.
Right. Exactly.
I think Winston
have you
Churchill
ever-
actually said that. Said something
So
like
at
I don't
Reveal-
disagree. I don't disagree.
Yeah.
At Reveal, have you had any times where, like, all of a sudden you release something and then you got that phone call or that email that was like you might want to take that one back?
I didn't read the description of a song. Like, it was just laughter was the soundtrack, but it had a divisive song title scrolling across the bottom. So luckily that one didn't leave the sandbox of TikTok, but HR was like, so Kat, can you pull that down? And can HR approve all of them? I'm like, yes and no.
Right.
No.
Exactly.
Approve is a bit of an ambiguous term.
But I mean, honestly, like, nothing I'm talking about super divisive. I think it really is just like, hey, there's stuff out there that helps you. I even try to, like, Alex is a little bit more irreverent towards lawyers. I try not to do that because I feel like lawyers are beat up enough. I just kind of want to make it, accessible, where someone's going to listen about kind of those entry level things like, oh, hey, Alexa might be evidence, or, oh, hey, I hadn't thought Slack might be evidence, or, oh, hey, there's stuff out there that makes doc review not a nightmare. Like, I'm trying to make it somewhat positive, not doom and gloom, nothing that's going to make people feel bad, because then I'm not doing my job, which is making something that's daunting less daunting. And you don't do that with fear, you do that with humor.
Yep.
Okay, so now, speaking of humor, let's move into some of the easier questions to hear some of your thoughts and answers on. These are going to be totally random, nothing to do with necessarily work, but the first one is an interesting one. High school, awesome or terrible?
I was a goth cheerleader. I don't know what else I could say.
Okay, well, we'll go
Platinum
with
blonde buzz cut, Texas cheerleader. I
There you
listened to
go.
a lot of Metallica, and then I would say, let's go LETSGO. It was, and I did competitive debate. It wasn't like, I was not the person who was like 1,000 people were my friends, but I kind of was the connector with all sorts of folks. I didn't really, but I was very much a wallflower, believe it or not. It actually,
Interesting.
it took Mark Yakino at Hudson physically pushing me on stage for the first time for me to actually go and start speaking. Like I had done debate, but that was much more structured. And so I was a little bit more introverted, a lot of platinum blonde buzz cut going on.
Okay. Beach or snow?
Beach all day, every day.
Good. I tend to agree. I hate the cold.
Sosha was telling me about last week being somewhere in a Nordic state doing cross-country snow skiing in 20-degree weather. And I was like, that is all you, my friend. No, thank you.
Yeah.
It's funny because I was actually talking to his son this week, and he was like, yeah, I want to come to Israel because I don't like the cold. I'm like, really? Growing up in Minnesota? That's
Hard to believe.
Yeah.
That's why I left Vermont, man. Come on.
Yeah.
Enough.
Okay. Who is your favorite Disney hero or heroine? And would you actually trade places with them?
I hate all of them. They're all kind of dysfunctional.
That's fair.
Ouch.
I like Ursula. She's kind of evil.
Okay.
Well, I watched it. I'm like, it's like when you're watching a horror movie. It's like you're running up the stairs, not out the front door. What's wrong with you?
Right.
So,
Right. It's the like sending the best friend off to go
I mean,
look in
if
the
we're
house
including like
themselves.
the Avengers, I would definitely trade places with like Lady Thor. She was pretty cool.
I would tend to agree.
You change
okay.
places with Lady Thor?
I mean, I would trade places with
No,
Thor.
not you, him.
Would I tend to agree that she's pretty cool. I would not trade.
Okay. No.
Although, you know what? Maybe. Okay.
Yeah, I know. Don't go there.
Yeah. Which band or artist would you have play at your funeral?
Metallica. I love them. Little Fade to
Awesome.
Black, Enter Sandman, Ride the Lightning.
Okay,
Yeah.
so like original lineup, not like more
Oh,
modern.
yeah. It would have to be like, pre Jason Newsted. So yeah, early.
Okay.
But before the fire burned poor James Hetfield's face. No, I'm not like a rock star. That's why I'm on the board of Law Rocks. I'm like an inner metalhead headbang.
Metal. Nice. What's the weirdest thing that you've ever eaten?
Fried scorpion was pretty bad. In Thailand, it was a stick. It tasted like crunchy sadness. It was not good.
Crunchy sadness.
Like I bit into it for like a picture, and I'm like, because it was like little flaky grosses.
Right. Okay, and last question from me is, if you could add any one person to Mount Rushmore, who would it be and why?
Ooh, so many. Maybe FDR. I feel like he was so impactful, and it was just so much later.
Okay.
Boom.
And now I will turn it over to Tom for a couple of random questions from Tom.
I love it.
Stones or Beatles?
I'm gonna say Stones because
Yes.
they were on a show and I saw them like 6 months ago, like still rocking on the stage. It was
Right?
You know,
Yeah. Right?
So Tom, you're now like 114 to 3. Congratulations. You got a third on your side.
I mean, the Beatles are great. They're just so safe. The Stones, though, it was funny. Like I knew a fair number of their songs. And after a 3-hour show nonstop, I had no voice because I had sung along to every song, even the ones that like I didn't even put 2 and 2 together. Like, oh shit, that's a Stone. Right.
Right.
So great minds think alike.
19th nervous breakdown? I didn't know that. Wow.
Yep.
All right. Then the last question, which we ask everyone. If you could spend a day with somebody from our profession, living or dead, no time restrictions on the person and broad definition of our profession, who would it be and what would you do?
So it's someone I have spent the day with before, but it's something that would be a wish list. So I would hang out with Judge Andy Peck in one of the Sherlock Holmes pubs in London, talking about his favorite Sherlock Holmes stories with him.
He might not leave.
In costume, both of us.
Yeah.
You know, and like maybe a London Sherlock tour or something. Hint, hint, Andy, if we're in London together, this must be done.
Oh, he needs little prompting to go into Sherlock mode. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
So, but that was like, I've spent a ton of time with him over the years. I'm like, I've never seen the Sherlock side in person, and I feel like
Oh,
that would complete me.
it's great. It's great. He's into it. He's
And I
very
mean, I
much.
say that with love. Like I love seeing
Yeah.
something that
And
just
he,
Yeah.
and
brings
he
so
would
much
do
joy.
it.
Oh,
He
I
would
know.
do it without a question, right?
Oh,
So that's
not a
unrealistic.
question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll have to
Yeah.
tag Andy and say, when is this happening?
Right.
Relativity Fest, London next year. You know,
I mean,
let's-
they might not want me crashing that.
I seem to remember in Chicago seeing you. No, it must have been someone else with blonde
you
hair.
think I was very subtly trying to walk into the party, tripped, and fell into Andrew Sage's arms.
Yeah, that one.
yeah, that was
That one.
subtle. I thought, you know, when I saw that, I thought, wow, that was subtle.
You know what? Like he helped form this industry. I'm helping form it on the AI side. Like we're all
Yeah.
friends. Like we move around so
Exactly.
much. We can't have enemies. Like,
Yeah.
I
know.
want all of us to be successful because that means far fewer red weld paper cuts and warehouses with asbestos snowflakes and sadness and paper manual review.
You know, years ago, I wrote a book. I actually, my good friend Dick Robbins had written The Automated Law Firm, and he tragically passed away. And the publisher, we were in the middle of like the third edition. The publisher asked me to take it over. Then the publisher was bought by the Dutch guys, the Dutch publishing company. I forget now. Read Selvier.
Hold on, you're talking about books.
Yeah,
We're
exactly.
of the modern
Right,
generation,
right.
Tom. Here, we don't read. Come on.
But the
Paper,
Dutch,
publishing?
they actually,
I scroll.
right,
Yeah,
when
exactly.
they bought the company, they came over to talk to all their different authors, and so we went out to dinner with this very nice Dutch businessman, and he said something like what you just said. Yeah, he said we you know, the Dutch. He said, think about it. We're like the tiniest country that's a power in Europe. We went toe to toe with all the big guys for hundreds of years, hundreds and hundreds of years. You know, we held our own against Spain and France, and Great Britain. And he said, and we've always done that by thinking there's enough pie for everybody. You know, the American attitude that you're going to wipe out all your competitors and you don't talk to anybody and blah, 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 blah. He said, we just find that very alien. He said, I'm not saying, you know, we're all going to, all the publishers are going to sit down together and be buddy buddy. He said, but, you know, like you said, what's good for business is good for business people, right?
Yep.
And if it's good for one, it's good for the other. So, yeah.
One of my favorite photos I took all year was a face-off picture of me and David Horrigan at a conference together, like pretending we're fighting and then giggling hysterically. You know, it's
Right.
We all grew up together in this. And I think anyone that fell into eDiscovery around the vintage we did in the last 30, 20 years, like you're a little irreverent. You are a little bit of a cowboy, a little Wild West, because we were building the plane, not just as we flew it, as we were figuring out the blueprint for what flying it might look like.
Right.
And so, you know, we have more in common than different. And my thought is, whatever, $20 billion, I'll settle for a quarter of it.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Exactly.
I'm with you.
All good.
Well, Kat, thanks so much for sharing some time with us. We really appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you. I don't know. Do you go to the University of Florida thing?
I won't be at that one, but I'll be at probably every single other thing.
Okay.
I'm working on Bill Hamilton. Eventually he'll be like, Kat, you must come.
Oh yeah, I'll say
We'll
something.
see about Legal Week. It's the next time that I'll be in the States for anything related.
Is what?
We're going to
Legal
be
Day?
revealed takeover of Legal Week, so you will not be able to escape us.
Oh, you know, Rachi
It'll be like
announced.
reveal and alternate. Like, yeah.
Well,
Right.
and we're going to have where they did the TED Talks last year. I'm going to be doing the podcast again. So if one or both of you want to do one of those quick 15-minute cheeky TechnoCat podcasts, you are
I'm
officially
in. I'm in.
invited.
Yep.
I love it.
And then if you want to join us at the Carnegie Club for cigars one evening, we'll be there as
You
well.
haven't yet. Hello.
All
I
right.
think that's where I met Andy Peck.
Oh, well, we'll definitely drag him along.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I love it. I love
All right.
it.
Rocky, thanks again. Look forward to seeing you in New York in a few months. And
Yep.
Kat, thanks once again. We really appreciate it. Everybody in the audience, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time on the eDiscovery channel.